As any of you know who watch my videos, I have masses of flowers in my garden, endless masses of flowers. I have so many flowers that I even sell flowers as a side hustle to a local farm shop. Now, it wouldn't be possible for me to have all these flowers if I went every year and every week or every month to the garden centre to fill my garden up with flowers that I bought from the garden centre. So obviously I grow my flowers from seed. When you're growing flowers from seed, they're either going to flower the same year that you sow them, or you need to sow them now for flowering the following year. And some of my favourite flowers in this garden I have to sow the year before. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the flowers that you need to sow now to have beautiful cottage garden flowers and cut flowers for this time next year. So let's start with number one, which is Campanula, or as we call it here in the UK, Canterbury bells. And this makes an absolutely brilliant cut flower that lasts a long time in the vase. It actually flowers for a long time as well. It has the additional advantage that it throws off branching stems that also flower as well. But this flower needs to put on enough foliage and bulk in the previous year in order for it to be able to flower the following year. Now, if you buy a really good packet of seeds, you will find that the germination rate is really good, so you don't have to overseed, and they're pretty low maintenance. Once you get them started and you thin them out and transplant them, then you can put them in the garden come the autumn or winter and just leave them. They don't need to be protected over winter. They will just do their thing. They will survive in a UK winter anyway, down to sort of -10, and they will just come up the next spring. In fact, they don't die back actually. You will see the foliage there all winter, and then come the spring they will just start to really bulk up and grow tall, and it's those tall stems upon which they flower with these gorgeous bells. Okay, and then the second one you need to do, and it also makes an excellent cut flower and just a long flowering garden flower, and that is Sweet William Dianthus. So this one is just another one that's amazing. You sow it the same as the Canterbury bells. It has really good germination. It just needs this season to bulk up all its green and put in its strength and energy into building roots and foliage. Again, it doesn't really die back that much. You'll see where it is all over winter. It doesn't need protecting from the frost, and as soon as the spring comes again, it will just bounce back up and it will start to put on more bulk and it will grow taller, and it's upon the top of those stems, like I said with the Canterbury bells, that the flowers will grow. It has an amazing flowering life in the garden, and it has an equally amazing vase life if you were thinking of having them as cut flowers in your own home or selling them as a side hustle. And by the way, if you do think about selling your flowers as a side hustle, I have done a video on that, and I'll link that in the description below. Now, the third one is Digitalis, better known as foxglove. Now, people think of this as a kind of annual. You see it sort of popping up everywhere, all over hedgerows and in forests and woodland areas. So it's great for a sort of shady spot. But that also needs to be started now for flowering next year. It's another one that needs to put on a lot of root and foliage before it can flower. There are some foxgloves and Canterbury bells foxgloves and digitalis that claim to flower the same year, but I'm guessing you would need to start those early undercover for them to grow enough root and foliage to flower the same year. So that's actually a bit of a hassle if you don't have a greenhouse. And so I would suggest just sow them the previous year in summer now for flowering next year. And that way you don't have to have a greenhouse, because they will just overwinter fine, even in quite harsh climates. Definitely they can survive quite harsh frosts. And so you don't need any special treatment. Once you've got those established in the garden, get them planted up. Once they're big enough, plant them out before the winter and the first frost. Let them get those roots bedded in. Let them get that foliage. They'll stay quite compact, low to the ground. And then the following spring, then once the temperature is right and the conditions are met, they will just sort of explode with growth, and then it will be those tall stems with those bells that will flower again in the summer. And they are biennial, so if you want a succession every year of these, you'll need to sow some every year because they don't flower every year. So they kind of peter out and then put on more bulk before they'll flower again every other year. I mean, there are some exceptions. You do sometimes get the odd one that will just flower again, but as a general rule, they only flower kind of once before they peter out. So you will need to sow them every year, every summer, around now. All the same principles apply when it comes to delphiniums. So another one that you need to sow now for next year, and for the exact same reasons that it needs to put on bulk, roots, and foliage. The only difference is the delphinium, unlike the others, the delphinium will die back to below the ground, so you won't necessarily know it's there. So you might need to mark your spot, but you can sow them from seed now. They have pretty good germination if you get a good packet, and you can sow them now, get them started, get them established, and then you can put them out in the borders before frost. They will overwinter outside. Again, no special treatment required, no special greenhouse or anything like that. Just put them straight out. The only thing is, if you do have a greenhouse, it could be an idea to keep them in there, overwintering there, because the slugs do like these ones in particular. Canterbury bells, foxgloves, and sweet William, the slugs don't seem to bother. Delphiniums, they do seem to like. Now, obviously, in the greenhouse where it's a bit warmer and drier, you can protect them a little bit more. I keep mine on a top shelf where it's quite dry, although I water them, but the slugs, they just haven't found a home there. So I have been able to keep them safe from slugs. That's just something to think of. But technically, they can go out in their garden, they will survive, and as with the others, come spring, they will just put on those big spikes and then they will flower the following summer. Unlike the digitalis, the delphiniums will perennialise, and so they will flower every year. In fact, they will get bigger and have more stems every year. Another great one for starting now is Sweet Rocket. Again, for all the same reasons as before, they need to put on the roots and they need to bulk up, but it's a great one for the back of the borders. It's a great one if you want to have a cottage garden, but you don't have a lot of time for gardening, because this one will fill a lot of space and it puts out a lot of flowers. And one plant, it will just be huge and full of flowers. And even when you cut back the flowers, say for instance, it got too tall in one of the borders I had mine in, so I cut it back and it has regrown. They're smaller. The second flush of flowers are smaller, but they regrow again and you get a second flush of flowers. And it self-seeds, so it kind of takes care of itself in that way as well. So that is another one that I would recommend you starting now to fill up your borders and have flowers early, because it flowers nice and early as well. It's one of the earlier flowering plants. It'll flower along with some of your later tulips, so you can put a nice little bunch of flowers in your house. Tulips and Sweet William, and maybe a bit of Honesty as well. Absolutely beautiful. So that is another one I recommend starting now. Now, while we're on the subject of Honesty, this is also another one that you need starting now. If you notice, Honesty does self-seed around your garden. Well, you won't if you haven't grown it yet, but it does self-seed around your garden, take my word for it. But, that can be a little bit hit and miss. If it self-seeds on a path, that's not where you want it. It might self-seed in a dry place and then peter out too early and not actually come to full fruition and flower. So the best way to take care of that and have a little bit more control over your Honesty is to sow them yourself. And they are another one that I think benefit from having a lot of foliage to grow first this year before they flower early, especially because they are early flowering, they need to be sown now to have enough time to get on enough root and foliage to flower early next year. So they flower kind of March, April. And they overwinter again fine out in the garden. They're pretty hardy, they're frost tolerant, so no special treatment is required at all. They do self-seed once you have them established in your garden, so that's another way if you're very short on time but you want a really billowy cottage garden and you want low maintenance plants, then Honesty is definitely one of those. Additionally, you can collect the seeds. The seeds that you collect are pretty reliable to reuse to grow more the following year. And the seeds are also pretty. They can dry. They look good as a filler in a cut flower bunch or in your vases. They also look really nice dried in the winter. But also, as I say, you can use the seeds again. Even those seeds, they're pretty reliable. You will get more flowers. If you use the seeds to grow more flowers the following year, the germination is pretty good on those as well. Now, yarrows, people love or hate yarrow because it's seen as a kind of a weedy plant, but obviously there are lots of speciality yarrows that you can buy. And I always find Achillea basically is what I'm talking about here. And I always find that they do better when you sow them the previous year. Again, let them bulk up, and then the next year they will flower really well. They're not like annuals, annuals shoot up and they just flower all very quickly within the space of a few weeks, really. These more perennial flowers just take a little bit longer, and yarrow is one of those, especially if they're kind of ornamental yarrows as opposed to these kind of roadside ones. But once you have them established in your garden, again, they just get bigger and better each year. I have another one I want to mention called greater knapweed. This was one that I sowed one year thinking it was an annual. Well, I didn't think it was an annual. I knew it was a perennial, but I thought it would come up the same year. It didn't. And I actually thought I did not have any success with this plant. But the following year, it absolutely took off. And it did die back below the surface. So I didn't really know it was there, or at least it died back very small and I wasn't sure what it was. And then the next year it started to come up, and I actually thought it was statice because it has kind of like those kind of wavy leaves like statice. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't think statice overwintered. And it wasn't. It was this greater knapweed. And greater knapweed is a British native wildflower, so it's absolutely great for biodiversity. The bees love it when it's in flower. And it also just has these pretty purple thistle-like heads, but there's no thistle, so the foliage and everything is just really soft and manageable. It lasts well in the vase. The heads are really pretty, but as I say, they're not thistles, so there's no spikes to deal with or anything like that. So it's perfect for wildlife, perfect for easy gardening. And perfect as a cut flower to put in a vase. And even the seed pods, when they kind of dry after it's finished flowering and you collect the seeds, or the seeds just blow off like they do with thistles, they kind of have that same effect. Even inside, the kind of the pods are like a silvery color, so they make a really nice dried feature in a dried flower bunch as well. Okay. And then my final choice, I think, especially if you're going for an easy garden, is valerian. Valerian, again, another one. It may, if you got it early enough, flower the same year, but it definitely just benefits from just starting the year before, about now, and then it will be a really good next year. It'll flower nice and early, and you'll get a good start on that. And again, it's another one that self-seeds. And it's another one that makes an absolutely great cut flower. My only reservation about valerian is, of course, you can buy these kind of weedy looking ones, the seeds. Just be careful you don't get those kind of pinky red ones, because they, certainly here in the UK, they are just weedy. The white ones, however, just have just that extra little bit of elegance. And they look really nice in a vase. And actually, a lot of people don't know the valerian because they don't know valerian can be white. So they just look really nice, like they have that kind of same effect as sort of cow parsley or layer in a cut flower vase, and they fill up a nice space and they self-seed. So what more can be said? These are just I think the perfect filler plants for having lots and lots of flowers, flowering at all different times in the year as well. And they just need starting the year before, and that seems like, oh, like I don't want to wait a year, but honestly, these are so worth waiting for. It really is worth it. They are pretty low maintenance as long as you water them and you get them transplanted and settled in before the first frosts. These plants will be absolutely a dream, and you'll be so glad that you've grown them. All right, well, I hope that helped. Please let me know how you get on with these. And if you want a really low maintenance garden, then just sow some seeds now. And by next year, you will have more flowers than you can imagine, more flowers than you could afford if you had to buy them at a garden centre by a long shot. And you'll be able to fill every room in your house with a beautiful bunch of flowers right throughout the season, just from this selection here. All right then, if you like this video and it helped, please don't forget to subscribe, click the thumbs up and share with your friends, and visit my website at www.jillbretherton.com, and I'll see you again in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.